Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning. Now, I make that 9 o'clock, Elaine, so I think we'll just get started.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Yeah, Elaine, sorry.
I'll now take a roll call for the minute and be grateful if members could confirm their presence when I call their name. Convener.
Present.
Bailey Roberts. I'll mark as absent. Councillor Short has submitted apologies. Councillor Scullin.
Present, and I've got apologies from Councillor Shears as well.
Thank you. And Bailey McPherson.
Good morning, present.
Thank you. Councillor Cowdy.
Present.
Councillor Darno is absent. Councillor Meehan.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Present.
Councillor McCall. I think Councillor McCall has just joined the meeting now. Councillor McCall.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. Bailey Williamson. I'll mark as absent. Councillor Anderson. I'll also mark as absent. Councillor Smith.
Good morning, present.
Thank you. And Councillor Cuthbert. I'll mark as absent. And that concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Elaine. If I could just mention that Bailey Roberts has sent a message saying she's having some IT issues and is trying to get in on her phone. Okay, so good morning, everyone, to the Tayside Valuation Joint Board. Just to remind people that the meeting is being recorded. And if you have a question, I'd like it if you could just put that in the chat and keep your microphones on mute if you are not talking. Thank you. Just another couple of things as well. Note we have a new member you'll see further on in the agenda, but Councillor Anderson joins us in replacing Bailey Ahern. So I'd like to just thank Bailey Ahern for his time on the board and welcome Councillor Anderson, although we will come to that in the agenda, in the fullness of the agenda. And also welcome Maureen Moran, who replaces Kenny McCaig as the legal assistant to the board following Kenny's retiral. So welcome Maureen, and obviously we put on record Kenny's assistance to the board during his time. So that's the introduction. I'll go back to Elaine to take us through the agenda now. I think you're on mute, Elaine, if you are trying to do something.
Apologies, Convener, I lost connections. The first item would be declaration of interest. Are there any declarations to the agenda as it stands? There being no declarations, item 3 is the minute of the meeting of the 28th of August for approval.
Okay, are these agreed? I think so. Thank you, Elaine.
Item 4 is membership of Perth and Kinross Council for noting.
Okay, welcome Councillor Anderson. And is that noted? Thank you. We have some chat message that Councillor Durno is struggling to join. I don't know if you could send her a new invite, Elaine. She's requesting that.
I certainly will, Convener. Thank you. The next item would be item 5, Electoral Registration Elections Act 2022.
Okay, I will let Roy introduce this for us.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Yes, this is a follow-on to the previous report.
In the previous report, we were given notification of future changes, but now some of those changes have arrived and are now in force. It should be noted, though, that these changes really just affect UK parliamentary general elections and recall petitions. The changes don't apply to Scottish elections. So I'll go through what they are briefly and see if there's any questions. The first one is the postal voting change. So postal vote signature refresh arrangements are now changed to a maximum of 3 years from 5, after which the elector needs to make a fresh application. Now that applies to postal vote applications made after 31st October 23. And transitional arrangements are in place. Those with an existing arrangement will not need to reapply for a number of years. But what is important is the existing 5-year refresh period for Scottish elections continues to apply. As far as proxy voting is concerned, for UK elections again, the total number of electors from whom a person may act as a proxy is now limited to 4, and no more than 2 can be for domestic electors. Again, this applies to any proxy vote appointments after 31st October this year, and transitional arrangements are in place again for this. And we will be writing out to existing proxy voters prior to 31st January next year to make them aware of the new arrangements and to reapply where required. A big change, though, is the online absent vote application service that's now been introduced by the UK government. That's gone live on 31st October this year. Now, the ERO portal from that date is available to accept online applications for absent votes, although paper applications continue to be available. At the time of writing this report, there hadn't been any applications, but since that we've received 2, so it's not a wide take-up at the moment. Now, the online service and the identity verification requirements, which is your national insurance number now has to be given, only applies to UK elections and recall petitions. For Scottish elections, paper application forms required to be completed. So that was that change, and I then go on to talk about Electoral Commission public awareness activities, and over the page is really just the same financial implications that there were in the last report. Now, just following up on issues that Councillor McCall had helpfully raised at the last meeting about publicity for all the changes. So a lot of preparatory work has gone on there. We've been in touch with the councils. We've received a list of organisations, as Councillor McCall suggested. A social media campaign has started. But we still need to follow through. Now that we've got the lists, it's to get the publicity out. What actually happened was we had to pause those activities while we were preparing for these latest changes, because it has been a really onerous time upgrading our electoral systems and getting this new ERO portal ready on time with all the forms and everything that are required. So it's been a major undertaking for our staff. But now that that's live, we'll get back to the publicity, follow up on these lists. We've also had meetings with RO staff, and they are very keen for us to work together on publicity and promotion of all the changes. So we'll follow that through, and we'll work with them closely to get out joint publicity where appropriate on all of these changes. That's the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy, and I'm sure the board notes the amount of work that's going into this, an onerous task, and I hope you can pass on our thanks to everyone involved with it. Now, do we have any questions? And I see Councillor Cuthbert.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it's not a question, it's a comment really, just to say that I completed an online application just to see how the system worked. And it's actually quite complicated. I think the signature is particularly difficult because it's got to be 160 pixels high. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
Okay, thank you for that. I see no further hands raised or requests for a comment. So can that be noted? Thank you. Elaine?
Thank you, Convener. Item 6, internal audit, and this is for Notang.
Okay, Roy, if you would like to introduce this for us.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this was the latest internal audit report. This time it was payroll, which was under scrutiny. And the outcome of this, the overall conclusion is that the level of assurance is satisfactory. The system meets the control objectives, but there are some weaknesses present. So 2 recommendations have been made to resolve these weaknesses, and I will now work to ensure these are actioned. To let you know what those are, recommendation 1 is on page 9 of the internal audit report, and that basically talks about procedures around authorising expenses. That recommendation has already been actioned, although there was a target date of December, it's already in place. The second recommendation is just a couple of pages on, and it talks about additional controls around employee standing data. So we have agreed to implement the recommendations by no later than December this year.
Thank you, Roy. I see Bailey McPherson has a question.
Thanks, convener, and thanks to Roy for his introduction. My question is about one of the weaknesses, which is the evidence of authorisation. I took it as overtime as opposed to general expenses, but I suppose the question I've got is, was there really a problem here? It indicated that overtime returns should be individually signed off by assistant assessors, and 5 out of the 10 sampled were not. But then goes on to talk about effectively electronic approval by the fact that the assistant assessor presumably then passed from members of staff these claims to the administration manager for finance and personnel. I suppose my question's really around procedure. Is there really a problem here, I suppose, is my question, as long as in these 5 cases, and indeed in any case, at the very least, the assistant assessor has passed the claim on, and it's not gone directly from the member of staff. It strikes me that that is essentially, as the report alludes to, acting as a form of electronic approval. And I'm just really wondering if this really requires a slight change in procedure to indicate that when something is passed on, for example, the attached email indicates approval has been given, or something to that effect. The bottom line on this is there really a problem here, and do we just really need to slightly tweak the written down procedures to ensure that we don't have this criticism in the future?
Yep, you know, having worked in this organisation for a number of years, we like to think that our procedures are good. However, when the auditor comes along and makes a recommendation for a slight improvement, we do our best to take that on board. So yes, you could take the view that what we had in place wasn't that bad, but now what we've put in place is something that you might say was even more enhanced. So what happens, it doesn't take a great deal over and above what you have said, which is correct. You could take it that was maybe sufficient, but now simply I just send an email as well, authorising everything once I've looked at it very briefly, and then that has full assessor approval as well. So it takes me very little time. I do that electronically, and I think that satisfies the auditor. Hopefully that satisfies you, but that's what we've done so far.
Yeah, that strikes me as perfectly sensible. What happens in the situation when, for example, Mr. Christie, you're not available? Is it done retrospectively?
That can happen, yes, but like you say, it's not like there isn't any approval in place. The assistant assessors are happy. It's just an enhanced level, me doing that. So yes, if I happen to be off for any particular reason, then I would do that. But what you'll find often with the assessor's role, whether they're off or not, they typically are available to sign things that have deadlines. So whether you're in Majorca, whether you're at home sick, you still carry out your duty typically, and it would be very unlikely that it wouldn't be done on time. But like you say, if for some reason it couldn't, it would be done retrospective.
Okay, that's very helpful, Mr. Christie. I have this vision now of you sitting on a beach in Mallorca, authorising overtime. But thanks very much for the response.
Thank you for the question and the answer there, Roy. I see no further questions on that, so can that report be noted? Thank you. Elaine, please.
Thank you. Item 7, Financial Reports 2022-2023.
Okay, I think Paul Thompson is going to introduce these for us. Paul?
Thank you, Convener. Good morning. If I may, Convener, can I hand over first to Richard Smith from Audit Scotland to present Audit Scotland's findings on the audit of the accounts, please?
Yes, that's fine. Morning, Richard.
Morning, Convener. Thank you very much. So in your papers today, you've actually got 2 reports from ourselves. So you've got our annual audit report, and then you've seen the supplementary papers. You've got the cover letter, which explains the audit completion process. So just to explain, the audit's now complete, and hopefully later today you'll be approving the annual accounts. So the key thing to note from the cover letter is set out at paragraph 1, which I'm pleased to say confirms that we're issuing a clean audit opinion on the 22-23 accounts, and a copy of that audit certificate is included in Appendix A of our letter, and will also be included in the audited accounts. Another point to draw members' attention to is that there were 2 errors identified during the audit that haven't been adjusted for in the audit accounts, and these are set out. There's a wee bit of background noise. Is that just me that's getting that? Or?
I don't have any, so it's
Okay, right, I'll keep going. Yeah, so that's set out paragraph 5 of the letter, and also detailed at Appendix 2 of our annual audit report. So, as explained in the letter, as the value of these unadjusted errors is below our materiality levels, it doesn't impact on audit opinions and annual accounts, and this is fairly common that there would be minor errors that we wouldn't expect to be adjusted for. The only other part of the cover letter I would highlight for members' attention is at paragraph 7. So this just details the type of issues that we'd expect members to make us aware of, if anything had arisen during the audit that we've not already been told about. So I would just ask members if there's any issues that they think we need to be made aware of to raise that during this meeting, just so we can consider them prior to signing the accounts later today. Moving on then to the annual audit report itself, and page 29 of your paper sets out the key messages. So I'll just very briefly touch on these, and then I'm happy to open up to questions. So points 1 and 2, that just confirms, as I've just discussed, that we've issued a clean audit opinion on the accounts. The next points in the key messages cover our wider scope audit work. So this typically looks at financial management, financial sustainability, and also arrangements in place to secure best value. Apologies for this, there's actually an error at point 3. So just to clarify that rather than being an underspend of 21,000, the actual final outturn position, no, the other way around. Rather than being an overspend of 51,000, it was an underspend of 21,000. So this is due to there was a late audit adjustment of 72,000, which is actually detailed in Exhibit 3 of the report at page 35. So the impact of that was it's actually an underspend that's been reported for the year. So apologies for this. So as I say, that was a late audit adjustment that hasn't been reflected in the key messages, and we'll make sure that we correct that for the final version that's issued later today. Point 4 in the key messages should be an issue that's known to members. This relates to the level of unearmarked reserves and the fact that that's currently below the approved level. So we've kind of highlighted that because obviously it's below the approved level, and also we've noted that there's plans to use further reserves in future years to balance the budget. So that's obviously something that's going to have to be carefully monitored by the joint boards to make sure that there's sufficient reserves available to respond to any unexpected events. But as I say, that was reported when the annual accounts, the unaudited annual accounts were taken to the joint boards. I'm sure members are well aware of that. Point 5 relates to standing orders and financial regs, which haven't been formally reviewed and updated since 2017 and 2018 respectively. So we've included a recommendation that these should be updated to ensure that they reflect the current requirements of business practices, and management has agreed to do this by the end of January 2024, so January next year. Point 6 confirms that we're content that the VAL board already has appropriate arrangements in place to secure best value, so we've not got any concerns about that. And then the final point is just a kind of comment on the NDR performance during the year. So we noted that processing times had dropped off significantly during 22-23. However, we do accept that the resource demands of carrying out the full revaluation of non-domestic subjects during the year has impacted on other NDR performance. So we hope that's just a kind of one-off glitch and performance levels will be back up next year. The only other section of the report that I was going to draw members' attention to, which I've already mentioned, is Exhibit 3 on page 35 sets out the significant findings from the financial statements audit. So as those charged with governance, we'd expect you to make sure you're content with the resolution of each of those issues before you approve the accounts for signing. So we'd ask members to obviously look at those points and make sure you're happy with what's shown in the resolution column. And the very final point to draw members' attention to is Appendix 1 on page 44. So this is an action plan that sets out 3 recommendations for improvement and also includes timescales for them and the agreed actions that management are going to take in response. So those are the points of our annual audit report. Apologies again for the error in the key messages page, and we'll make sure that's corrected. We usually prefer we're finding the errors rather than making them. And if members have any questions, and myself or Mark Johnson, who's the senior auditor for the audit, will be happy to pick them up just now. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you for that introduction there, Richard. Bailey McPherson has a question, and then Councillor Cuthbert will be after that. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. My question is about something Richard actually alluded to in his overview, and that's the NDR performance, which obviously, and I think understandably, has dipped due to revaluation work. Obviously, it is obviously we've had a situation where in 21-22 only 12% of entries and amendments to the valuation rule took more than 6 months, and that's sort of doubled. I was just really wondering if Mr. Christie could give an indication. Is that, and I presume it is, but I'll ask the question anyway, is that a Scotland-wide performance, if you like, given that the same issues will affect other assessors across Scotland? And also how confident, just taking Richard's point about, a desire to see that we return to the sort of performance we saw in 2021 and 21-22, is that likely to happen in the months and years going forward?
Yeah, so as far as a dip is concerned, yes, it is Scotland-wide. And what I would say is, although it's a dip Scotland-wide, Tayside are amongst the leaders in performance still, compared to other assessors. So yes, it was felt across the country. The move to a 3-yearly revaluation has had a major impact. But it wasn't only that. There were other tasks that the Scottish Government now asks us to do, and one of those is an annual self-catering unit audit. That was a very major task, and that's also felt across Scotland. It's been a big drain on resources, and in fact, about half of our valuation staff were exclusively tied up on that for 3 to 5 months. So that will be repeated annually. As far as how it all settles down, I would say definitely our figures will bounce upwards. However, how far back up the bounce really depends on how that annual audit plays out going forward. So what we find is that we now have to do revals every 3 years, and there are extra annual duties imposed on us that we never had before. So I would expect the KPIs to rise, but we just need to wait and see the jury's out on whether they rise to where they were before. But certainly they would rise, I would expect.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks indeed.
Thank you for that. Right, Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, my question relates to page 35. It's the valuation of the pension asset. And I note that there's 300,000 unfunded obligations. I'm just wondering, as a board, should we be concerned? Should we be doing something about it, or is it just an accounting technicality?
Paul, are you going to address that?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert, for the question. In answer to your question, the auditor's investigator, the review of the accounts identified that we showed a higher asset in comparison to other joint boards. There is no requirement for concern. The actuary has reviewed the asset again, and the adjustment has been made within the accounts. This is just a notional adjustment, technical accounting, and the position that members should be concerned about is the funding position, which will be reflected in the next triennial valuation.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for that, Paul. Well, I see no further questions on that, so can that be noted? And then we'll go back to Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The next item would be the response to the External Auditor's Annual Audit Report.
Thank you. Still with you then, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. So this report is the Council, or I beg your pardon, the Board's formal response, Treasurer's response to the Auditor's report, reflecting the adjustments that Audit Scotland have identified and requesting for the Board's permission to sign off the accounts and publish them for issue.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any comment on that? No. So can that be noted? Oh, hold on. So I saw a hand raised there.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, okay. On you go. Just
Yeah, so sorry about that. Roy, I was wondering if you could help me. I was wondering about the impact possibly that short-term lets have on you know, a rolling roll or appeals. And is it having any impact at all as people actually are coming off and have been claiming business rates and decide to go back onto domestic rates, or is it just a static position?
Right. So when you say short-term lets, do you mean holiday cottages and the like? Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
That's right, Roy. That's right.
Yeah. So that was part of the self-catering unit audit that I was speaking about. So what's happened is, in Tayside, we have around 1,400 such properties that were audited, and following the audit, I would say there are around 200 that have moved to the council tax list. So that's been the actual practical effect, that there are 200 properties now paying council tax than what were before. So what happens in the following years, that number may grow, that switches over, but certainly that's what it's meant to us so far, if that helps.
Yeah, is it possible to come back in, Karina?
yes, that's fine, Billy Williamson.
Yeah, Roy, I was just wondering, is there any evidence, or have you been picking up any evidence, for example, where people have been claiming business rates relief and have been illegally claiming business rates relief when they should have been paying domestic rates relief because they were under the guise of a short-term let? Is that an issue, or have we found any trends there?
So I think the Scottish Government were generally aware, and even published it in the Barclay Review, that there was a concern over fraudulent activity in this sector. And the way they wanted to tackle it was to pass legislation, which would mean you now had to prove that you were letting them out for 70 days or more, rather than just signing a form saying it was available for 140 days. So over all the years, operators would have happily been signing a form saying it's available for let. And that's a very low bar. Anybody can sign that. You don't actually have to let it at all. It's just to be available for let. So this new legislation has mean now actually have to demonstrate that it's actually being used for that purpose. So that's where the government wanted to tackle it, this situation. Now, I think the vast majority of operators following this exercise have been shown to be legitimate. But certainly there will be some in there who will have, for a number of years, been evading paying tax. But this is the way the government wanted to deal with it. And the back dates only to 1st April 22. So that we are just following the legislation. I have no doubt that within there will be some people who have been not acting correctly. But we can't really prove that because all they had to do was sign a form saying it was available for let.
And going forward, therefore, Roy, will that mean that we're proactive in trying to seek those out, or will you wait until they come in, and will that have an impact on the business as we have to actually go out and try and find these if necessary?
So what we do is, well, every year now going forward, we'll write to every self-catering unit operator to check they're still acting in that way and to ask for proof that they are doing it that way. I think they also now have to apply for a licence via the council, and that might flush some others out as well. So we have all sorts of ways of finding out, but we also write to everyone every year now to check on their use and ask for proof. And if they don't meet the proof requirements, they'll go into the council tax list and start paying council tax.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Roy, thank you.
Thank you for that and those questions. Now, another hand has been raised. Is that right, Councillor McCall?
Good morning. Thank you, Convener. It's just really a follow-up to Bailey Williamson's question. If you do find someone is part of your annual review of properties that are claiming business rates and are unable to demonstrate that they have in fact been letting the property out and it changes to domestic rates, how is that notified to the council?
Well, any changes that we make to the valuation roller list are notified to the council on a weekly basis, and then they amend their record. So really, every week throughout the year, they are updated, and then they can act on what we pass on.
And I presume that's really to the finance department in terms of issuing bills. Okay.
Yep.
Because there could also be potentially breach of planning or licensing if they're not actually letting them out.
Yes.
Bailey Williams would know more about that, but it's just a thought about how we join up all those dots internally within the council. It's not really a matter for this board, but it's certainly a question I think all of us elected members should be asking within our council. So if we've not done it already, it may already be done. But
yeah, so
okay,
that's
thank
it.
you.
I mean, just to follow up on that, if I may. So yeah, we pass that to the finance department, and I guess internally it would be up to them what they then do with that information.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those contributions. And is that now noted? Okay, thank you. Elaine, back to the agenda, please.
Thank you. Item 7C is the annual accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2023.
Okay, Paul, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, convener. And finally, in terms of the audited accounts, this paper is the actual annual accounts that have been updated for all the audit adjustments that we've just discussed and will now be signed and published for issue.
Okay, Councillor Cuthbert, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. It's an acronym. I'm just wondering what a GAE figure is. It's on page 60.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. So, if you bear with me 1 second. So GAE stands for Grant Aided Expenditure, and it's the government's assessment of the level of expenditure that should be incurred on a particular activity. So in the context of the Valuation Board's accounts, the government will set grant aided expenditure, which is an assessment of what the level of expenditure should be funded to fund lands valuation and council tax, and it's used as an apportionment basis to split the requisition between the three constituent authorities.
So can I come back and does that reflect then the amount of work or the value of what you're doing, or how is that calculated?
So forgive me, Councillor Cuthbert, I don't have the detail in terms of how the particular lands valuation and council tax ones are calculated, albeit I can confirm that the government has set grant aided expenditure for all activities undertaken by council and review these on an annual basis in line with various statistical information and returns, etc., that are provided. So I'm not aware precisely in terms of the context for the lands valuation and council tax, but happy to find that out and share that with yourselves and other councillors in due course.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul. So with that then, is that noted? Thank you. Elaine, please.
Thank you, convener. Item 8, revenue monitoring for 6 months to 30th of September 2023, and this is for no time.
Okay, Paul, please.
Thank you again, convener. So item 8 is the revenue monitoring position to the end of September that identifies the board's overall spend and projected spend for the year, and identifies and projects at least that will be a balanced budget for the current year. Notwithstanding that, there are a number of movements to the approved budget, and they are detailed accordingly in the account and also to the appendix. So happy to take any particular questions there are.
Yeah. Bailey McPherson has a question.
Thanks. My question is probably more for Mr. Christie than for Paul, and it's in relation to the information in para 4 about property and the £35,000 overspend or projected budget variance, to be strictly accurate, in relation to utility bills at Robertson House. We're all aware, obviously, that utility bills have been increasing at a frankly exponential rate. But I noticed that actually the reason quoted for the projected budget overshoot is actually that usage was underestimated. And I'm just really wondering why that would have occurred, and has it been, I assume it will be planned to ensure that budgets in future years are adjusted if that is a long-term increase in the utility bills at Robertson House.
Yep, so the electricity company hadn't been coming out to give us accurate readings, and we were chasing that up, and eventually we got through to them and they started coming out. So that won't be repeated. So that's what happened. They weren't coming out. We relied on the estimated bills, and that was the problem there. So that shouldn't be repeated going forward. And as you say, utility bills, yeah, have been rising incredibly. So that doesn't help at all. But that was the reason for the underestimate.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Thank you for the question there and the answer, Roy. Are there any further questions? I don't see any, so can that be noted? Thank you. Back to you, Elaine, please.
Thank you. Item 9, position of Assessor and Electoral Registration Officer, and this is for Notang.
Well, yes, this is for Notang. Roy, congratulations, firstly. You're getting to move on to pastures new while you're still young. I just want to say, certainly personally, thank you for all your assistance in my time on the board. You're a great help. You have all the answers and a very personable way of going about it too. So it's certainly been a pleasure being on the board with you on it. And clearly I wish you well for the future, although we still have you for a couple more board meetings, I think. So not quite getting away, but certainly thank you on a personal level and, on behalf of the board, although maybe other board members may wish to say something at this point, but certainly thank you. Now, anyone else wish to comment, or can I speak on behalf of the board? A lot of nodding heads. Bailey McPherson.
Yeah, I just wanted to say how...
You're on mute, sorry, Bailey McPherson.
Yes, I'm just aware of that. Thanks very much. I'm just wanting to say, obviously, I think we all agree that Roy and in his previous roles with the Valuation Joint Board, I know Roy from a previous, now retired from life as well, and he's held in great esteem by all his colleagues, and we obviously wish him all the best for the future.
Thank you, Billy McPherson. I think Councillor Cuthbert, you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what you've said. I think it's been a pleasure working with you, Roy. Everything we get from you is clear, it's concise, and it's to the point, and I think that's wonderful. So we'll miss you.
Now, Roy, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thanks very much for that. That's really kind of you. I will miss working with you all. I've really enjoyed that as well. A note for you for the future, though, of assessors' offices, which would be worthwhile, especially for my predecessor perhaps to take on board. What has happened is to around half a dozen youngish assessors who were recently promoted, they've all been hit with massive, almost six-figure tax bills because the value of their pensions rose too much. Now, the history of this is that way back in time, all assessors' offices used to have a deputy assessor, and then you would make an incremental promotional step from assistant to deputy to assessor, and you would not have been hit with this tax burden. But because offices were restructured in the past, deputy assessors' posts were done away with. The jump is now big, which is great from a salary point of view, but from a pension point of view, it really cripples your pension. So that's part of the reason for me moving on. So what I would say is that just something to bear in mind for the future. I will be speaking to other assessor colleagues, and it's really up to them what they do, and it's up to all the boards what they do. But I think that deputy level should really be reinstated. That is the training ground for becoming an assessor, and it would do away with future recruitment problems. So it's just a thought for the future. But putting that aside, I've really enjoyed my time working with you all. I've enjoyed my time working with Tayside Valuation Joint Board. 28 years out of a total career of 40. It really will be hard to move on. But thank you very much for all your support during my time as well.
Thank you, Roy. Comments noted, and when the time comes, we wish you all the best for the future. So, thank you. Okay, so that is noted, with some sadness, I think, generally. And Elaine, back to you, please.
Thank you, Convener. Item 10 is the programme of meetings for 2024 for noting.
Okay, are those noted? Thank you. Back to you, Elaine.
And then item 11 is the date of the next meeting is 22nd of January 2024 for noting.
Thank you. Is that noted? Thank you. Elaine.
That concludes the public part of the agenda.
Okay. Now, I don't think there are any press or public here, Elaine, to be excluded from the meeting, but if we could just double check for the confidential item before we move forward.